Hi there, this is David, and welcome to my review of MANAFINDER, released for the PC. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. I'm a retro gamer at heart. Anything with a throwback style to simpler times is the quickest way to capture my attention. And really, it doesn't take more than a quick glance to see that this is just about as retro as they come. Yeah, they could have gone with that smoothed out, mobile sprite style with the newest RPG Maker assets, but they didn't. The studio instead opted to go for that kind of Game Boy Color meets Game Boy Advance style, kind of like Lufia, and I'm loving it. The entire premise is actually quite interesting. The world is besieged by monsters, humanity huddles together in cities protected by mana barriers, and you play as Lambda, a silent protagonist who's arrested for an unspecified crime and sentenced to exile, which is pretty much here a death sentence, as the holy city of Mana Hill is the only place in the world protected from these beasts. Or so it seems. After being tossed out of the city and then running for her life, she's pretty much the lone survivor as she stumbles across the settlement, which is a much smaller village protected by a similar mana barrier. Though it needs that mana power to function, and that is where you come into play. In return to shelter, you agree to become a mana finder for the village, and then scour the fields for shards of mana to power the barrier and protect the populace. Death is around every corner, so don't get too attached to anyone, because here, both beasts and man are after you. The world is separated and explored in regions. Each one is distinct from the last and full of secrets. You'll find little sparklies on the ground to gather, ore to mine, mana shards to collect, magic spells and weapons tucked away, as well as herbs to forage. This is definitely a game that rewards the diligent explorer. Don't just keep to the same old path and then expect to get everything that you need to complete the area. You're going to have to really explore here, which is such a nice, refreshing change of pace from being spoon-fed everything in the more modern games. Encounters occur on screen, and you can sneak up on them and then ambush the enemies from behind, gaining extra attacks and damage, while conversely, they can sneak up on you, so just be prepared. You begin alone, but you're soon joined by a little doggy companion, Scar, who's a woman's best friend, and by your side through it all. The battle system is fast and fun, with an over-the-shoulder viewpoint straight out of Phantasy Star. Your little doggy Scar can be directly controlled or just commanded, so for the most part I just let the little good boy do his own thing while I focus on Lambda. Other guests and mana finders join up with you as well, but they're kind of more like the guests in that Game Boy classic Great Greed, where they just kind of randomly do their own thing whenever. Now, while this might look like a typical Dragon Quest or early Final Fantasy, there's quite a bit of differences that let it stand on its own 2 feet, mostly dealing with the leveling, the magic system, and the weakness system. Each of your weapons has different species that they're more effective against. For example, your axe will deal more damage to mammals, your bow more damage to flying enemies, your spear more damage to fish, reptiles, and amphibians, and so on. You really have to pay attention to what sorts of monsters you're fighting and then use the appropriate weapon. Magic is here as well, but that works differently too. Firstly, you're not really going to be using those traditional healing or nuking spells. Instead, you're more than likely going to want to focus on buffs and debuffs, regeneration, and various stances. You can learn spells in 2 different ways. First, from leveling up, and then secondly, from larger mana stones tucked away in secret areas. And speaking of mana stones, that's how you cast spells here too. MP does not exist. Each spell costs a different amount of shards, kind of like the alchemy system in Secret of Evermore, only much more simpler. I like this refreshing take on combat, and once you figure out the weaknesses and you get the hang of it, battles will go by quickly. Don't get me wrong, they can be on the harder side, especially the first boss, whenever you don't have many abilities going for you, although the difficulty does tone down as you continue playing and get more familiarized with the game's systems. Because magical elemental affinities don't really exist here as far as spells are concerned, there is another way to take advantage of them, mainly by imbuing yourself with the elemental orbs that you end up mining. Without taking a turn, you can attune yourself to an element to gain an advantage in combat, either through offense or defense. For example, if you're fighting a fire monster, you would want to imbue Lambda with ice in order to deal extra damage. Though since you're now ice elemental, you're going to end up taking more damage from fire, so it's kind of a risk versus reward trade-off. There's also a very simple limit break system. The gauge will fill whenever you deal or take damage, and whenever it maxes out you can unleash the weapon's special skill, and each weapon has its own associated limit break. Thankfully, you can save those limit breaks for bosses and the harder, rarer monsters too. Just as battling is different, so is leveling. At each save point you set up camp, heal up, and pray to the gods. It's only here whenever you offer up spirit dust that you can gain a level, as well as an associated skill point, of which you'll spend on either attack or defense. There are stat gains, magic spells, resistances, easier limit breaks, just tons of things to spend those stat points on. Lambda is customizable in every way, shape, and form. Not only can you level, save, and heal up for free at these save points, but they also double as fast travel points too, which makes backtracking a complete non-issue. Just like everything else, gold is even handled differently here too. Instead of walking around as rich as Croesus like in many other RPGs, here you are a perpetual pauper. You don't really gain gold from battles, you just gain it by selling stuff, and that stuff is pretty rare. So you're going to have to be really aware of what you're spending your hard-earned cash on. That being said though, I never did have to grind for any experience or gold, though I did think about it after that first brutal boss battle. As the land here is really uncultivated, you're going to have to learn how to live off of it by collecting, foraging for healing herbs and roots, creating dog biscuits, and mining ore to imbue yourself. While the entire package might seem really simple on the surface, trust me whenever I say that there's a lot under the hood here to find, discover, and enjoy. I will say this, I personally don't need flashy graphics, 60 frames per second, or the latest hardware in order to enjoy a game. I just need a good story, fun gameplay, and great exploration, and MANAFINDER has that in spades. If I were to put this up against some of the more recent, bigger budget RPG releases from well-known companies, I would choose MANAFINDER any day of the week. So, that's it for my review of MANAFINDER. How do you feel about it? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this video and wanted to hear on the channel, please consider supporting me over on Patreon for some exclusive videos and early access to my content, heading on over to Twitch for some streaming fun, or coming on over to my Discord to chat and hang out. The links to them all can be found in the video description. This has been David. If you like this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a good day.